So I'm going to start off this video by one phrase, and that phrase is going to be show up as you are. And in the context of, what to expect in therapy, a lot of people think that when you come to therapy or a therapy session in general, you have to have a clear-cut problem, right? You have to have something you need to address. And that's not always the case. That may be what gets you into therapy, but that doesn't mean you're going to be experiencing the distress or the stress of that every time you show up. So with that said, show up as you are. I think that's one of the things that I learned as a therapist is to show up as I am, and I try my best to do that. And that may mean that you have something very pronounced that you want to talk about in session. You had a situation with a partner or at work or a certain thing that you've been experiencing. But then other times you come to therapy, and despite having a whole, week or few days, you show up to therapy and you're just not really connecting with whatever that was. So in those cases, you show up as you are. And that sometimes might look like just sort of talking about your week, reporting on your week. And what you often find is that may be fine for a session. It's just regular human connection. But you also find is that when you allow yourself to do that, it's really interesting how often organically that kind of leads into what it needs to lead into for you for that day. Everyone shows up in session with what they need to show up with. So show up as you are. Don't feel stressed out that you have to present a certain thing. And maybe even calling out the fact like, hey, I don't even know what to talk about today. Or, despite how I showed up last week when I was feeling terrible or bad, I feel fine this week. And that's okay. That's part of this whole process. A lot of people show up to therapy and it ends up being such a safe place for them that when they show up to therapy, they feel calm and they feel regulated. And they don't feel like they do out in the world around them, in relationship or work or, just their personal lives. So that's very common too. And at other times you may show up and you may feel not great. And that's all right too. So don't put any pressure on yourself to feel like you need to show up every time with a clear-cut topic. If you have one, that's great. But if not, it's also perfectly fine. We work with whatever shows up in that moment.